Welcome back to the Contender Connection live stream and the Monocle Dynasty podcast. We have a special guest today, but he is kind of on a time crunch, so we're not going to do anything too crazy. I was going to do this grand introduction and everything, talking about the next Matthew Berry, but for now we're just going to go ahead and stick with Dave with FF Spaceman. How's it going, Dave?
I actually just told you I had a time crunch, so you wouldn't do that because I wouldn't hate for you to be lying to your audience. So that's where I went with there.
And we were joined by Nubs, but he's having some connection issues right now, so I'm sure he'll be hopping back on here in a little bit. But today we're basically going to be talking.
You know those film watchers, John? They can't handle this data.
That's true. I was going to tell him to
handle the data, so that's why.
Yeah, I was going to tell him to put earmuffs on anyway. Here he is. He's coming back in. He might be in and out, but we know those film watchers can't handle the numbers and the database and everything, so they get a little scared and they drop out from time to time, but that's okay. So that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Dave's weekly database and basically just everything about it, who's standing out in the database. And we did this in week 5, I believe, but since it's been a little bit, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the database, how it came about, and what it's all about, Dave?
So in the past, I've just made this for myself, for my own fantasy research. And then I was like, you know what? I'll just share it for everyone. And then people kept on saying, oh, I really like this. I really like it. It took off. So essentially what it is it's every fantasy relevant player that I deem fantasy relevant. I can't track every player because I kind of did it on the whim. I literally was only gonna do it for myself. And then people kept on saying, oh, can you add this player? Can you add this player? I was like, okay, I guess I will. And then now it's up to like 380, 90 players or something like that. And the idea is that I only try to include the fantasy relevant information for people, so there's not a lot of noise. And there are some stats that are more important than others, but I'm not putting in just these weird random stats, in my opinion, that confuse and don't help people. So the idea is that all the information you're going to need in one spot to make your fantasy decisions, and it's updated before, and it's free, which is the big thing. It's free. So that's the big thing. And then also it updates before a lot of the major websites do. And that's the idea, is that I get it out for free before everyone else does.
Yeah, that's been one of the great things for me is, I noticed some of the websites wouldn't update until, midweek, late in the week. And sometimes you're looking for stuff and you have Thursday games and not everybody's even updated. And so that was one of the best things for me is you are getting those stats out as quickly as possible and everything. But obviously you can find the database on your page. I also put it on the website at contenderconnection.com. That's where I always go. It has its own dedicated page. Also, PA Howdy has his database on there as well. So there's a lot of great info there. But we kind of wanted to dive into the database and see, exactly like who's standing out. Obviously, we did it in week 5, and we had some, some big names, some of the rookies and everything we were looking at. But a lot's changed since then. Nubs, I know you're not as big into the numbers, but have you ever even looked at the database? I think Nubs is frozen or delayed. All right, so Nubs is having some issues, so we'll just go ahead and talk. But all right, so first of all, Dave, is there anyone that's truly like standing?
Database. You got to have a little bit of knowledge on both sides.
Yep, Nubs is definitely delayed there, but we'll go ahead and continue on. Is there anyone that's like standing out to you, Dave, or when you want? Do you want to just like kind of look at it and dive in that way?
There's a lot of people, a lot of players that are standing out in different categories. What has been fun to see is how people have been catching up to certain things. Like people have gotten more and more receptive of target share. They've gotten more receptive of air yards. They're talking about air yards on national TV broadcasts now, and some of it's in joking and haha. But it's just cool is that everything is there that you need, and it's tough to say what players are standing at what spot. So I thought it might be better just to go through position by position, and we could start with the quarterbacks and like how I kind of go and I look at, what matters for a quarterback. So looking through, so what's really easy is that you just, filter for the QB position, and what I care about first and foremost for quarterbacks is that, well, there's two parts to it to a quarterback nowadays, and everyone knows there's the passing side of it and there's the rushing side of it. So the first thing I do is I go to the passing side of it and I look at their accuracy. And so I just I look at their completion percentage, and sometimes completion percentage gives me a good idea. And the people that are really standing out from completion percentage standpoint, some of the rookies, like Justin Herbert, he's in middle of the road in completion percentage. But when you adjust that for rookies, he's doing very well for rookies. And just overall, compared to last year, Josh Allen, and I know he was even doing better early on the season, but he is still going far and beyond what you would expect from a stats point of view. And I'm not going to sit here and just read off numbers because it's pretty boring, but just Josh Allen's I think he's ranked 9th overall in accuracy, which is just insane that Josh Allen would be ranked 9th in accuracy. I didn't think he could hit the broadside of a barn. So, and he's a very person who loves me. He's very polar guy, but Josh Allen stands out from just a purely an accuracy standpoint. He's doing it. And I don't want to just ramble on, John, but the other parts of completion percentages is actually when you look at raw completion percentage, it's really just to give you an idea. What matters more and has been found to be more predictive is clean pocket, how good you are in a clean pocket, because that's better year to year because offensive lines fluctuate from year to year. People still think Dallas Cowboys have this amazing offensive line, but it's actually degraded severely over the last couple of years. So how good you are in a clean pocket is actually very predictive. I also like to know about deep ball accuracy just so, for the big plays. And then it's it's just simple stuff like how many yards per attempt. And then the really fancy stat for quarterbacks is completion percentage over expected, which is a stat that Josh Hermsmeyer created. And it basically, what makes completion percentage over expected so exciting is that, exciting for me anyway, is that it factors in strength of opponent. It factors in, how basically based on the situation, the down, the time of the game, what that pass should look like, or what your percentage should look like, and how higher or lower you are based on your completion percentage. And it's actually very predictive. And what's great about it is it also Josh Hermsmeyer describes it as it almost captures the quarterback's decision-making ability. And that's when you can start. Everyone's like, oh, it's really tough to filter out certain parts of a QB's game in numbers wise. But when you can actually see a quarterback making the right decisions, and it's kind of reflected in CPOE. That's exciting. So that's kind of how I look at quarterbacks, at least from a throwing perspective. How about you? What do you, John? You use the database a lot. You're probably the power user. What about you?
Actually, the funny thing is, I truly don't look at quarterbacks that often with it, and so like you had said, the clean pocket percentage is pretty important, and that's kind of something that we're kind of learning now. So this is what's great about the database. I haven't really looked at the quarterbacks, and so I'm looking at it now, and who's standing out to me is Sam Darnold. He has a let's see what it is. He has a 78.6% clean pocket completion rate. And so, that's around Kyler, Derek Carr, Josh Allen, Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater. Like those are at least some of those names might not be guys that you're, truly thinking of as like these stud quarterbacks, but and obviously that's not just the only stat you're looking at or anything like that, but it's just one of those things that does stand out, and people are pretty down on Sam Darnold, and so it's cool when you see that kind of thing, and somebody standing out like that, and it can be a little bit different. Timmy, I don't know if you're with us or if you're still delayed like 30 seconds, but if you are, what have you seen on the film side of it with Darnold? Does anything stand out?
Well, that was something that really kind of irked me this week when I was watching the Jets Raiders game, was the fact that he has so little help from his line to protect him and to actually let him get through progressions. But you do see, obviously, with the numbers with this, you do see that he's capable. It's the consistency that's lacking. But I think that consistency, same as when we had a discussion earlier in the preseason or the offseason when we were talking about Sutton's potential outcomes. There's a lot of things that could be to his detriment on his performance that have really nothing to do with him. And I believe that a big contributor to this is actually the offensive line for the Jets. And if they can figure that out, or they can figure out a little bit different of a scheme where he's able to attack earlier in maybe shorter drops or things of that nature, you'd see a lot more consistency in his performance.
Yeah, definitely. But it's nice to see that you are seeing something in the film aspect of it. Uh, we got Nick talking about Dave and Timmy here being studs. Just he's always watching, so we appreciate you, bud. But all right, so like I said, I don't really check out the quarterbacks too often, but Dave, I think you were still muted. But
Yeah,
what I
no,
do
I'm
love to look
struggling
at
here.
it. What I do love to look at though is the wide receivers and the running backs because there's so much information to glean from the database. I don't know how much you guys can see of the database on your screen. If you're watching on your phone, probably not that much. If you're watching on the computer, probably a decent amount. But when you're looking at, let's say, I went to wide receivers. When you're looking at wide receivers, what are you looking for? When you're trying to look to see who's doing the best, or who's standing out, like those kind of things.
I mean, the first thing you want to look at is that always comes out to me is target share, because especially early on in the season, that matters a lot. And then it depends if you're looking from a dynasty perspective or a redraft perspective. If I'm looking from a dynasty perspective, I care a lot about target share because that tells me about the percentage of the offense this season. And that translates pretty well to the next season. Whereas raw target numbers, so the hot button topic of the day is Deontay Johnson. I think he's averaging something like 11 targets per game or something like that. I saw, if my memory serves me correctly. And
It's like 11
when you
points.
add, yes, targets per game is very helpful. What's that?
No, I think
Sorry.
you're right.
And then
Yeah.
what's really, when you with Deontay Johnson, when you think about him, is that's really predictive for this season from week to week. 11.5 targets, I can bank on that volume. But next year, Big Ben might not be back. Other quarterbacks might be back. We've seen that with actually in the same Pittsburgh offense, James Conner, who had these highest targets in one of the most prolific passing games we've had in the last 15 years or so. A couple of years ago for the Steelers was like this amazing receiving back, PPR back. Well, they've changed their offense. Big Ben isn't targeting receiver or running backs out of the backfield as much, and that raw target number isn't helpful. So when you look at the target share, it's going to help you from week to week. Season to season, and it just helps you for especially for guys who don't play as much. So like John, I bet you know who I'm going to say next. Denzel Mims. Denzel Mims, your boy. He does not have a lot of the counting stats that we expect, and also he's on a very bad offense. But on a bad offense, he's commanding a very high target share. And hey, if they get a Trevor Lawrence, or if they get they upgrade at QB, they upgrade it some more on offensive line. They just upgrade that at coach. And what that could do for Mims going to next year, if he's still commanding that large of a share of the offense, sky's the limit. So that's the first thing I care about the most before I get too excited and I start talking about some other things. So
Yeah, and I think to Dave's point, it's when you're looking at the share, the reason why you care about that more than just the targets per game is just like Denzel Mims only has 6.2 targets per game right now because they're not throwing the ball as much, but he has a larger target share. And so, like you said, if something changes, if if they have a different coach, if they have a different quarterback, whatever it is, if the offense changes, that's when you want that target share, because then when that goes up, now you have a stud. Whereas with Deontay, not that it's a substantial difference, but you're talking about between Mims and Deontay, a 24.8% share and a 23.3% share with Deontay. Not a huge difference. Not gonna not enough to really nitpick about, but you could definitely see if they're not throwing it 50 times a game, then he's not going to be seeing 9.6 targets per game either. Now, Tim, with I know
Dave,
you've been doing.
Question with you.
Oh, go ahead.
For you. When we were discussing target share, we obviously are seeing a little bit of a drop from the league leaders. What kind of projections do you think you're going to have with this next year going in for a dynasty aspect in terms of what we expect maybe a new baseline of elite target share to be?
So the number still is 30%. That's when I get excited after 3 or 4 weeks in the start of the season, after week 3 or week 4, and I still see someone over 30%. I get a little excited. In the I'm not going to say what the code word is in the spreadsheet industry, but let's just say that the mouse clicks, the mouse jumps a little bit, and you get a little excited. So 30% target share is elite. That's what DeAndre Hopkins was with Deshaun Watson. That's what Devontae Adams is right now, and that's still there. But the problem is, 3 or 4 years ago, in the height of zero RB, we were having 3, 4, 5, 6 players over 30%. Now, as the league as a whole, and this is I do a lot more of this in the offseason, so I'm just kind of giving guesstimates right now. But what we've seen is that there are more targets going to running backs instead of wide receivers, and as quarterbacks come from college and a more passing with more passing volume in college, they're used to getting to their second, their third read, so they're hitting their second and third wide receivers more. And they're also there's a lot of these quarterbacks are getting a lot better at making reads before the snap, so they know who the wide receiver is going to be open just from the defense. And so what that is doing is that is decreasing a lot of the target shares of the second half of the wide receiver ones, the top 12 wide receivers. And it's a really good point, Tim. But what we're still seeing is that there is still an elite core of targets. And some of these, just because you don't have that elite target share, sometimes they're being more efficient with those targets. So it's a tough situation, but I still think the 30% is the way to go. That was a real long way of answering 30%, Tim, just in case.
Yeah, and we're seeing that there's only one person as of right now, one player that's actually hitting that threshold. There's quite a few that are pretty close, but actually over the 30%. Now, going back to Mims that we were talking about before, he's had some games over 30%, but then like this week he was down at 15%. So that's what is bringing him down to the 24.8. So obviously, like it's you have to look at it as a season. You can't just look at it like one game or per game basis or anything like that. So
and
now, go ahead.
No, sorry, I think we're actually a little bit of a lag here. I'm in a lag, but
seems like it.
The thing with target share too is, if we're really going to get nerdy, Jen, that's just the tease. Target share is the tease. There's a lot of other things that really gets me excited with wide receivers. Is that where we're going? Or are you going to move positions on me?
No, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, what are we looking at? Because target share is great, but like you said, let's get nerdy. The whole point of this was to, you got your glasses on. We're getting nerdy. We're getting into the numbers today.
Yeah. So that exactly. And so if I'm getting nerdy, so 5 years ago, I'd say even 7 years ago, targets were probably talked about, but maybe 10 years ago now, targets was a new thing. People didn't really care about targets. And what is great about just targets is it's a very simple stat. It's very easy to understand. And then the next evolution of that is target share. It's the target percentage in your offense. That's also very simple to understand. Now, as we advance and we try to get a little bit more into the numbers, there's actually something that's more predictive of future year targets than just targets, because targets actually aren't that predictive of future targets because of changes in the offensive scheme and that kind of stuff. So some stats that are more predictive of targets are actually receiving yards per team pass attempt, but even better than that are scrimmage yards per team play, or some people could just call it yards per attempt. That's what they call it, yards per team attempt. So, but I call it yards per or scrimmage yards per play. And what it does is it takes it's a combination of an efficiency stat, which is like yards per reception is an efficiency stat. How good are you per catch? And efficiency is not very good for fantasy. It explains like how you're doing very good in a season, but efficiency varies extremely or a lot year to year. And volume is more indicative of from year to year, and that's why we like targets so much. But to take to the next step, scrimmage yards per team or scrimmage yards per play is more effective because it combines volume and efficiency into one very effective metric. So scrimmage yards per play, that's now once I start seeing that, Peter Howard's a big fan of that stat, and Anthony Amico is, and I start hearing people throw that around. It is fun to hear about because it's I don't think that's that complicated of a stat. It's pretty simple to understand. It's just basically how many plays you run and how many yards you gain within the offense. And so that's what I like to see. And anywhere over two, like Justin Jefferson, we talk about someone who's killing this. Justin Jefferson, I don't know the number right off my head here, but Justin Jefferson is smashing that right now. He is, and that's what's so special within that offense and how many plays they're running and what he's doing within that offense. I am really struggling between, is CeeDee Lamb my number one wide receiver from this 2020 class, or is it Justin Jefferson? Because Justin Jefferson is just smashing right now. In a lot of metrics, not just that metric, but it's special to see.
And like you said, I am kind of a power user of the database. And so that was one of the big, shocks for me was how amazing Justin Jefferson is doing. And I mean, obviously you can see it in fantasy scoring and all that kind of stuff. It's not like you need the database. But then I think, what's important for me is you look at the database to see if it's real, like if it's happening for a reason or if it's just happening. And, you look at certain players like a Chase Claypool or somebody like that. And, we saw him score all those touchdowns in the beginning of the season. And then, you look at the database and you're like, well, yeah, he's scoring a lot of touchdowns, but he's not really doing a lot in these other categories. Whereas with Justin Jefferson, we might not have wanted to believe in it. And then you go look at the database, and I mean, especially we're 13 weeks in now. 5-6 weeks ago, maybe you didn't have enough data, but now you do, and it's like, man, he's sitting here fourth in the scrim yards per play at 1.32. That's awesome.
And we're just talking about two stats right now. And then if we take it to the next level for stats, and this is when it gets a little bit more. So this is when we go to air yards. I think by this point, a lot of fantasy players know what air yards is. It's basically why air yards are important is it measures the intention of the offense. How deep you throw is how involved that receiver is intended to be in the offense. And then when you take it to air yards market share, how much of the share of the air yards are getting in the offense, that's very important. But then you take target share and you combine it with air yards market share into one thing called Whopper or weighted opportunity share. That's when things that's basically we're hitting all the erogenous zones right here. I'm getting, target share. All right. You got my attention on a podcast. Oh, scrim yards per play. Okay. I'm getting a little blush, but now I'm trying. I got to mute my mic after we get to Whopper and then John and Tim know because when our chats here, but oh God, Whopper is where it happens. And it's an all-inclusive stat. It gets me everything I need to know all in once is Whopper.
Yeah, and obviously it's not a perfect stat because we see like Marquise Brown is up here, but I mean the truth is he is getting targeted. He has a lot of air yards, and in fact he has some of the most air yards in the league. But if the quarterback can't get him the ball, then it doesn't matter how many air yards you have. Now that's also another stat that you'll probably talk about here in a second, but more importantly, he is getting targeted. He is getting those, he is getting those air yards. But you see, I mean, with the highest Whopper ratings is, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, Tyreek Hill, Robbie Anderson is up there. He's kind of tapered off more recently, but, he started off so hot in the beginning of the year. DeAndre Hopkins and, Denzel Mims once again. And this is why, at least, for myself, I've become such a big Denzel Mims fan is because he's really, he's hitting all of these points. He's in like top 10 for just about everything except for fantasy points, of course.
Those will come. And like when you talk about, see, this is when we want to, I know Marquise Brown gets a lot of hate, but he's come on recently. Things ebb and flow for offenses. Like Lamar Jackson's, he's down right now. He's regressed. We can all admit that he's regressed now, but it's almost an overcorrection. And that's not really how regression works. It doesn't overcorrect or anything like that, but it feels that way. And what happens is if Lamar Jackson can rebound, if the offensive line gets healthy again, if they add some other weapons, if they actually just start giving J.K. Dobbins more touches, all kinds of things can happen. They get an easier schedule. For the Ravens next year, it just shows you what his percentage of that offense is and how that can translate going forward. And the only problem with Whopper, the number with Whopper that it spits out, it's really a funky stat. It sounds sexy, but when you look at it, it's like, what the heck does a 0.74 Whopper mean? And that's a good point. So, and just in your back of your mind, people should think that 0.7 is the elite line. If you're hitting 0.7 or anything above that is elite. That's like Julio Jones in his prime. That is a number that shows that not only are they dominating the air yards, they're dominating the targets. They're basically in control of that offense. So when you're looking at Whopper, so you're not just like, oh, I don't know what it means. 0.7, awesome. 0.45 to 0.6, really, really good. And then it's just, you go from there. So Whopper is a favorite of mine.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to the scrim yards per play, I wanted to ask Tim if there was anyone that really stands out in like the top 10 that you either completely agree with as far as the analytics are concerned, or completely disagree with, because we have Devonte Adams, Tyreek Hill, DK, Justin Jefferson, Will Fuller, Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, DeAndre Hopkins, and Robbie Anderson, and Corey Davis, our boy.
Our boy. Well, I think what it does is it it kind of solidifies or it reinforces what we see out on the field, that these guys are studs. And what I actually really find interesting, and what I really appreciate, is how well Stephon Diggs has played this year. Just based on, what is he, second targets per game, or is he second in target share? I can't remember, but it's just insane how he went from a second option who did have some drops, but he also wasn't. There was only specific parts on the field that he really received targets. Obviously, he got different ones in different places sometimes, but a majority of the time it was a specific spot on the field. So that could have been attributed to more or less what Cousins was doing, or how the offense was treating him. But he's really showing that he's complete. He has all the tools. He can run all the routes. He makes the catches that are difficult on the sideline. He also beats your guy down the sideline. So I'm really impressed with what I see from Diggs, and I still don't know if he gets the credit he deserves.
No, I agree, and he's third
It,
in target share. Go
Tim,
ahead.
what it is, it's the Josh Allen hangover. What we had is so one, he was a wide receiver moving teams. That was like, oh, okay, that usually has been a bad thing. But actually, with him and DeAndre Hopkins, it hasn't hurt them as much as we thought it was. DeAndre Hopkins kind of tailed off a little bit at times here. But overall, from a wide receiver standpoint, Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins have exceeded expectations, and especially Stephon Diggs, because people didn't think that Josh Allen had another jump in him, because this jump is just tremendous. I have never, ever in my entire fantasy football watching life have seen a quarterback make such progression in throwing the ball. And people can say, like, oh, Dave, are you overreacting to that one throw he had that was all over the place in the primetime game? It's like, no. His completion percentage over expected. The stats are showing that Josh Allen is the real deal. Now, is he as bulletproof as a Patrick Mahomes as a passer? No, he's not. But people need to start respecting Josh Allen for what he is. And in turn, Stephon Diggs pair with Josh Allen moving forward. Now, I know Josh Allen still needs to get a contract going forward, but I think Buffalo knows. I think that's going to happen. And the idea of Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs together moving forward, Tim, you're right. People are too low on Stephon Diggs moving forward.
Yeah,
Actually,
definitely.
I wanted
And
to
I was
ask you
one of those
too.
people.
Go ahead, John.
I was one of those people, and we definitely have a lag because we keep talking all over each other. But yeah, I mean, I sold Stephon Diggs in multiple leagues because I wanted nothing to do with Diggs in Buffalo, and I mean, it was a major mistake. Luckily I didn't sell like low. I got players that I liked. I got Mari Cooper in one league, and I got Tyler Lockett in like a second in another league. But obviously, like, I wish I had Stephon Diggs. I don't hate the fact that I have those players, but I think anyone and everyone would wish that they have Stephon Diggs right now.
And if you even like compare,
And
like,
he's what,
no,
27
I don't
years
want to
old or
compare
something like
play
that?
styles or anything of that nature, but probably right
We are
around that
lagging
age.
so hard.
Yeah, it's bad. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, he's 27. Sorry, Tim.
No, it's fine. I don't know what it is today, but my connection is just awful. Um, is he, he's kind of having the same impact that like a prime Antonio Brown did. Obviously, Antonio Brown did a little bit more with shake and getting loose on defenders, but the clutch or the go-to when they need something, he's their guy. So I would almost want to do a study, see what his performance is like on third down or on plays that they need to get a score or something of that nature, where how he's performing on those, because I think those might even be even more important pieces to look at for maybe value to the team or something. I'm not exactly sure how I would go about that, but there's so much value that he is bringing to that team, and he's kind of shifting the paradigm where they're not just pretenders anymore.
And Tim, what's crazy about Stephon Diggs is, and we've been talking a lot of positive things. Now there's a lot, and John, John and I both we alternate about getting too far over our skis on certain players. I like to think that I'm a rational, cool, calculated, number-centric guy, but I'll tell you, I get overexcited. And what is happening with Stephon Diggs is that people need to understand this is not abnormal what he's doing. His TD rate is at 4.4%. And TD rate, when you look at TD rate, that is touchdowns are hard to predict from year to year. So when you have an inflated TD rate, like Adam Thielen, for example, has a 21.1% TD rate. That is extremely high. I think he's got 12 reception TDs, but Stephon Diggs is doing it on volume, yards, and receptions. And yeah, he's scoring. He's got 4 TDs. That's not terrible, but just Stephon Diggs is doing it in so many different ways on an offense that has just totally evolved now that they have a Cole Beasley who's playing out of his mind. Gabriel Davis, and John and I like to say Gabby Davis, is really hitting his stride. And and John Brown doing what he's supposed to be doing. And Dawson Knox, while he hasn't hit the expectations, he's a developing asset. Man, this Buffalo team has some weapons. And Stephon Diggs, he's not over expectation right now. He is doing even maybe a little bit below what the volume is saying. I could do another 20 minutes on Stephon Diggs, but he's a guy that people have not caught up on enough because I'm not sure if it's the Buffalo thing or if people are still thinking like, when he was Adam Thielen in Minnesota, or they still think that Buffalo's a rush first team. Buffalo is throwing the ball at a very high rate this year. They've totally changed that offense once Stephon Diggs arrived, and Josh Allen is now throwing at a competent level for the NFL. Yes, people are too low on Stephon Diggs. I think there's a buy window in Dynasty and even next year in redraft. Stephon Diggs is a target.
Which is kind of crazy when you think about it because, as well as he's done, it's kind of crazy to think that he could be even better. But that was actually one of the things that I did notice about Diggs was, that he could actually be doing better because of that TD rate. And then on the other side of it, a couple weeks ago, I was looking at DK Metcalf and he was sitting at a 20% touchdown rate. And it was like, this isn't going to continue on. Well, guess what? He's already down to a 14.3%. So just in a matter of a few weeks, he's already dropped, substantially 6%. That's a huge drop. Well, we see AJ Brown. While AJ Brown and DK, I mean, both of them are hitting in a lot of the other metrics that we're looking at. It's not like they're terrible players or anything like that, but they're still AJ Brown's still sitting at an 18.2% touchdown rate. So, when you look at that and you realize that's going to regress and that's going to come down, most likely, at the very least, year to year, maybe not week to week or anything like that, but year to year. And like those are the things that you can't count on. You can't count on a guy to score every fifth play that he touches the ball.
Tim and John and listeners too. Are we all Indiana Jones fans?
Oh yeah.
You gotta like Indiana Jones.
Oh my God!
I
mean, come on, we're all fantasy players. We got to be nerds for a little bit to love Indiana Jones. And the thing with Indiana Jones is there's a part of us that wants that skeleton key, that one stat that's going to get us what we want to know. And it comes down to it. There isn't. So when you look at TD rate is a nice little stat that supplements these other stats and shows you like, it just provides some context. Like, oh wow, he's got a great whopper. He's got a great target share. He's the wide receiver 2 overall right now in fantasy. But let's take a look here. Whoa, his TD rate's way out of proportion. And another simple way, TD rate's one way to look at it. But even a more simple way to look at it, actually another simple way, not more simple, but just another simple way to look at it. And this applies for running backs as well. It's receiving yards for wide receivers or tight ends, or rush yards for running backs per touchdown. Very simple stat. And you can just see it and look at it and say, look, how many receiving yards do they have per touchdown? AJ Brown has 90 receiving yards per touchdown. That is an incredibly low rate. Tyreek Hill, 83 receiving yards per touchdown. That is, TD rate. The touchdowns that they're scoring is at an astronomically high level. Now, does that mean they're automatically going to regress to a low rate? Not necessarily. But we just need to realize that you want to make sure that these players have other things like targets per game or target share or Whopper or other things just to make sure that those are all in check, because we've had players like, in the first 4 weeks of the season, like maybe even a Chase Claypool, who are astronomically high in touchdowns, and we get really excited because touchdowns make or break weeks in fantasy. They really do. You score touchdowns, you're going to win your fantasy week. Yards aren't as important, but week to week, yards are more consistent, and you can look at what can I count on, and receiving yards or rush yards per TD is a great regression metric to see, like, hey, what should I expect going forward for this player? Do you guys think
Yeah,
does that make sense? Does that make what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it makes really
what do you
good
think,
sense
Tim?
because what it does is it puts into context. I think it makes really good sense because when you put it into context, you can actually look at opportunities where if they're below, I don't want to say even mean or like regression of the mean on this because that's kind of individual performance. But if they're below what the kind of expected touchdown numbers are supposed to be, there may even be that opportunity where you're getting that consistent scoring. But then maybe the next season you get that little bit of a spike kick or bump in terms of scoring because they score 2 or 3 more touchdowns. So you're already having that floor, almost like that Julio Jones type floor many seasons, or he's not scoring a bunch of touchdowns, or the Calvin Johnson type floor. And then if he has one of those spike seasons, you're getting maybe a 5 or 6, player increase in the rankings, just in the individual rankings, um, compared to the year prior at that previous cost or value.
Yeah, definitely. I think we talked about the wide receivers enough. Obviously, like you can go through the database and you can see, who's outproducing what they should be, who's due for regression, all that kind of good stuff. There's so much to look at. And, I said this last time, I'll say it again. If anyone ever needs help, obviously Dave will help, but he's very busy doing the database and everything. So I'm more than happy to help. And I have become a power user. It's kind of funny because when I first started out, I didn't even know how to use Excel. And now I'm sitting here doing all this stuff, and it's mostly because of Dave. But
Well, John, and not, John, and I don't want the name. He who shall be named, Crescent, a former co-host on this, the Monocle. What they did is like, hey, Dave, like we don't know how to use. Like, can you just help us out here? Like, this seems really exciting. Can you just show me how to do certain things? And I was like, look, guys, I'm not an expert. I was clueless at one point too. Like, I'm still am clueless, but I'm not as clueless as I used to be. So let's get on a Zoom call. Let's Saturday morning or even like Friday afternoon. Let's do half an hour and let's just give you the basics. John, I forget your official title. What are you, assistant to what? What's your official title?
assistant to the director of quality control for the database.
Yes, that's exactly. John is my assistant to the assistant to the director of quality control, and what that really means is that honestly, I seriously appreciate John because I do not have time to go through and look at all of these individual stats to see if they're pulling from the right direction. And when John say, "Hey, this number doesn't look right," even tonight, what happens is I changed the database over, or I added a couple of columns to the database. I wanted to get more complete picture of fantasy points, so I had return touchdowns and 2-point conversions. And John's sitting there goes, "Hey, Dave, this stat doesn't look right. Yak looks a little low." It's like, it should be right. I looked at it. I was like, that's a little low. I went, yep, John's right. I forgot to add one little part of an equation, and I fixed it really quick. But the point I'm trying to make is that this database isn't just me. It's people like John. It's people like Tim who, when we're on happy hour on Friday nights, we're all talking, we're throwing out ideas. And this thing, and the reason why we make it free is because information is not mine. It's not mine. I should not be profiting off of it. This is just something that all of us can have to make us better fantasy analysts. And it's really fun to talk about because even just tonight, John's picking out people like Sam Darnold. I did not think about Sam Darnold's ability in a clean pocket beforehand, even though I believe in clean pocket percentage and how important it is. John goes and picks out how important that is. And then I get people who message like, "Hey, what about this weighted opportunities for Kenyon Drake versus Chase Edmonds?" Like that's, they're actually a little bit more even. So that's why their fantasy points are more even. I'm like, yeah, that's actually a really good point. This is the data is free, and all it takes is a DM to anybody. out there to just try, hey, look, like this seems overwhelming. There's like 35 columns, maybe probably more, like 100 columns. It's overwhelming, 400 players, but there's simple ways to look at it. And John, and like, even if you message Tim, like, hey, can you grab, all of us are willing to help. So that's part of the fun part of Contender Connection. Monocle, Tim, John, that's what fantasy community is all about, in my opinion. End of rant. Sorry, guys.
No, definitely. I wanted to ask Timmy, kind of switch over to running backs over here, and who's a running back? We'll just pick one that's like kind of a question mark for you. Could be a rookie, it could be a veteran, whoever it is, and we'll look it up, and then we'll go over what we're looking for when we're looking at running backs.
That's actually a really easy one because I'm really not concerned, but I'm always kind of just thinking about the future, what this player might do, or how what I can expect out of them next season. That's Damian Harris. I know he's had some good games. I know he's actually been graded highly for his overall performance as a running back from PFF, but I don't know. I don't know even if Cam is gone, if they get a quarterback, how that impacts his future. We're going to say performances on the team, as well as the addition of Sony Michelle coming back, how all that's going to shake out. So that would be one that I'd be, what do I say, wanted to go a little bit deeper dive on.
John, I've been talking my face off here. Do you want to give it the first crack or what?
Yeah, sure. I'll go with it. I mean, Dave's the true expert, but like I guess now that I've officially earned power user and assistant to the director of the quality control for the database, I guess I can actually talk about it a little bit myself. With Harris, one thing that, like, the first thing I always look at with running backs, and Dave might have a different opinion, but one of the first things I'm always looking at is weighted opportunities per games played. And if you look here, if you can look on the screen, you're gonna see he has 81 overall, or 81 total weighted opportunities, and then he has 9 per game played. Now that's not fantastic. It's not absolutely terrible or anything like that. But if we go ahead and sort here by weighted opportunities per game played, which I already did, then you're going to see your CMC at 21.5, Joe Mixon at 18.4. Now, obviously, Joe Mixon's an afterthought to people at this point, but when he was playing, he was getting the rock, and he was getting the rock at the right times. Weighted opportunity, and all right, that's actually one thing we haven't talked about here, and I'll switch over if you look at the screen, but there is a glossary here. There's going to be a lot, if you're brand new to it, there's going to be a lot that you have no idea, what the hell is a whopper? What the hell is a racer? Like that kind of stuff. What's weighted opportunity? And it's right here. Weighted opportunity measures opportunities based on their fantasy significance. Targets are worth 2.74 times more than rush attempts. So, somebody like a CMC, somebody like a Alvin Kamara that's getting all those targets, obviously those are better opportunities for them. Hence, they score more points. So we're looking at that. And with 9, like I said, when you're talking about a CMC getting 21.5, a Joe Mixon getting 18.4, 9 isn't anything spectacular. Now, there can also be more to it, because if he didn't actually have the opportunity share earlier, but now he's starting to get it more, that's when we're going to go look at like week 13, and then we can search here for, sorry, I'm doing this on the fly. I'm going to clear it. I'm going to type in Damian Harris, and bam, we had 10.9 in week 13. So not that much different than what his 2020 averages are showing. It's definitely not terrible, but it's just showing that he doesn't have that workhorse back kind of role that you might be hoping for, at least at this point. Is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing something different on the field?
Well, I think he's more or less matchup dependent, to be honest with you. Like he had the big game versus Baltimore, but Baltimore's line was, in shambles for probably 3 or 4 weeks. So that's something I looked at, as well as, there's when you're playing with the quarterback like Cam, you're not really always getting consistent looks at the goal line, because he might be taking them, or he might be getting them down to the end zone anyway.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
John, I'm not sure if you saw me, but I gave you when you went straight to weighted opportunities. I gave you a round of applause. I know I was on mute, but it felt like a bird first flight out of the nest. It 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 was special, man. I don't know if it's the gin talking. Gin tonics they're flowing tonight on a Wednesday night, but you were soaring, man. You were soaring. It was special. And you nailed it. Weighted opportunity is a big thing because I write a weekly opportunity share report for Dynasty League football. I really enjoy it because weighted opportunity is one of those things, but opportunity share is just a quick snapshot of what's important. It looks at like how much percentage of opportunities the running backs get based on first off, we take out QB rushes because it's tough to tell is that a designed run play or just a scramble. So we take out QBs, basically any non-QB rush attempt, and then also running back targets combined. The percentage of that is, and that's a very easy snapshot to see how much of that offense the running back is commanding. That's what opportunity share is. But a great supplement to that is weighted opportunity. You could have, a 95% opportunity share, but in a like for James Conner, for example, like there might only be like 10, 12 running back opportunities in a week because they're throwing to wide receivers the entire time. And then you go and look at like, oh man, 92% target share. Opportunity share. That's amazing. Let's go look at the weighted opportunities. Oh yeah, he only has 10. That's not, it's double digits, but it's still not what we like to see. So that it tempers expectations. So John, very good weighted opportunities. But for me, what I care about running backs is first, I care about it goes two things, but I go back and forth. But again, scrimmage yards per play, awesome thing. What's great about scrimmage yards per play is that it's effective for both running backs and wide receivers. So yeah, I care a lot about scrimmage yards per play for running backs. But RotoViz has an expected points model that similar to Josh Hermsmeyer's CPOE or completion percentage over expected. Expected points is based on it basically looks at the averages based on where they are in the field and how many fantasy points a rush attempt should give you and how many fantasy points a target should give you. And that's what expected points are. And it's very effective for your year. It's probably points per game is very effective actually for your year for running backs because it's like a efficiency stat combined into a volume stat combined in all in one. So points per game is very effective, but expected points is probably it beats it. So by a little bit. So expected points by RotoViz, great tool. And it basically says how many fantasy points you get based on your volume. And Damian Harris, what you'll see is that his fantasy points, then what it has is expect. So this is when you get more complicated. We've been pretty uncomplicated through here, but expected points, it tells you what you should be getting on your volume. And then the second stat to go with that is fantasy points over or fantasy points over expected. So based on those expected points, how many fantasy points did you score over that or under that? And that's an efficiency metric. And those are extremely valuable to find. So expected points, what your volume should be giving you, fantasy points are expected, how good you actually did on that volume. And Damian Harris is because he runs the ball so much, because James White is there, because Rex Burkhead was there, because Cam Newton doesn't throw the ball a lot to running backs. Actually, he does a lot this year because of how the Patriots offense is. But overall, it's just Damian Harris just doesn't have that ceiling. He's very game script dependent, and he's also very touchdown dependent. Now, is he good running back on talent alone? Yeah, he's popped off the page as far as making his cuts, making his reads, how much volume he's getting in the ground through the ground. But because his expected points and his fantasy points are expected, I would just temper the expectations because you want those running backs who have the receiving upside. That is why in fantasy football it's so important. Even in standard leagues, it's very important. I need to go on for another 20 minutes, but I got to stop right here because I've been rambling. So.
Actually, I was going to point out that Timmy's boy Damian Harris is number 10 on the list if you're talking about scrim yards per play. So I think that is showing that when he is getting the ball, when he's running with it, he's doing well with it. But that's when I think you have to kind of combine both the weighted opportunities and the scrim yards per play because. Yeah, that's great. When he's running the ball, you look, Ronald Jones is right above him. Ronald Jones is number 9. And that's great. Ronald Jones is doing well when he's running the ball, but we know that Ronald Jones is a zero in the pass game. If anything, he might be a negative in the pass game. So like that's when you go and look at the weighted opportunities and add it up. What's up, Dave?
I just want to say, like, that's a perfect example because streaming yards per play is a picture of how the value within that offense, how they're doing per play in that offense. But expected points or weight opportunities shows you just their raw volume. And when you combine those two together and you look at them side by side, that's how you really can get a complete picture of how it's going. And this is not in the database, but it's from RotoViz, and it will be in the database next year. And that's actually in Peter Howard's database. RotoViz actually splits up expected points into receiving expected points and rushing expected points. And I'm actually going to be featuring this a lot more in my week 13 target share report, or not target, week 13 opportunity share report for DLF is looking at those running backs based on their passing expected points and receiving expected points. Receiving expected points and rushing expected points, because what that does is when you have 10 expected points through the ground and 10 receiving points through the air, your ceiling and floor is astronomical. And basically, Christian McCaffrey is the only running back that's doing that right now. And he's about to come back in the playoffs. And I know he had a quad strain today, but it just highlights how even Dalvin Cook, who's very impressive, he's got 15 rushing expected points per game, and like something around like 6 or something receiving expected points. And to have that kind of floor and that kind of volume, that's special. So even though Dalvin Cook has a very difficult playoff schedule, his floor is pretty solid. So I'm not saying he's going to blow the doors off or he's bulletproof, but that's another way that I want to look at it going forward when we really get into the weeds of running backs. That's before we even get into other things. But this is just looking at it from an efficiency and volume point of view, is that I get excited about that. But there's one thing we haven't really talked about yet, John, and I think it's you and I both our favorite thing to talk about for running backs. What is that?
For running backs?
Yeah, for running backs. What have we not talked about that?
Evaded tackles and juke rate.
Evaded tackles and juke rate. And what is so important, and I know a very popular stat is, yards after contact for PFF or yards created. I think Graham Barfield's the father of yards created. Those are very good stats, but what has shown time and time again is an effective stat is evaded tackles per game. And what that is showing you, volume, we should have led the show off with this for running backs, is volume is king for running backs. That's why we care so much about opportunity. That's why we care about weighted opportunity. That's why we care about screen yards per play, is because it shows how much volume and how efficient they are being with it. But something that's independent of that is how good they are at creating, space or fancy points, or just how good they are at creating independent of their offensive situation or whatever it is. And when you can break a tackle or evade a tackle at a high rate, that shows what your individual running back talent is. And it's a great tool to look at how good you are at evaded tackles, or just at overall as a running back. So that's very good from year to year. So yeah, oh my God, Kenyon Drake's getting all the volume in Arizona. He's really good. But then I look at these other efficiency things. His fantasy points over expected, not so good. He's like 15th worst in fantasy points over expected. I look at his evaded tackles. Oh my God, he's not really doing a lot with his volume. Yeah, he's getting the volume, not very efficient with it. So I throw in the brakes, and then I look at players who are being efficient, like Joe Mixon last year, and other players. Like, actually, I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire has actually been pretty good at times. Josh Jacobs at times. I think he's faded a little bit in evaded tackles. It's a very important stat to look at year to year. So that's where I'll stop with running backs.
Yeah, I was going to bring up one of Timmy's boys with DeAndre Swift, because I know he can talk about him all day long. I know it's kind of sad right now, but he can. But why don't you talk about Swift? I wanted to bring up a couple of these rookie running backs. Yeah, right.
Well,
So
what I like about Swift
okay.
is he's actually played exactly like kind of expected how to play. Um, but what I really like about him is his ability to both be a dominant receiving back and to know what to do when he gets the ball, as well as when he gets past that first level of defense, he's a load to bring down, or he's a load to even try to track and to take the right angle. And I just think when she gets a consistent level of elite volume, you're going to see a consistent level of elite points week to week.
No, I like it. Dave, I wanted to bring up these three players because a lot of people are all over Swift. Obviously, the concussion came at a terrible time when he was kind of getting like the lead back role. And then you have the two big names in CH and Jonathan Taylor, that were 101 and 102 in most leagues. Obviously, like some people are CH fans, some people were Jonathan Taylor fans, but they were going early no matter what. And I kind of wanted to compare a little bit because I feel like if you're actually looking at the numbers, that it might like actually dictate a different narrative than what people are actually saying on Twitter or in public.
So DeAndre Swift, and now mind you, so this year with COVID, the fantasy season's been a little bit crazy. I would normally in a normal season by Wednesday afternoon, I would have the evaded tackles updated by Wednesday afternoon. But because they put it on Tuesday, I'm not going to be able to get to evaded tackles until Thursday and update it. So this is through their evaded tackles uh is through 10 is through 12 games, not 13. DeAndre Swift, hold your breath, ladies and gentlemen. Only nine evaded tackles nine evaded tackles total in the season. Not so good. But the thing you need to supplement evaded tackles with is big runs. The evaded tackles is very important, but breakaway runs or big runs, whatever terminology you want to use, is a very important stat because it just shows your overall athleticism making the big play. So yeah, his evaded tackles haven't been very good, but his big runs are good. So the thing with DeAndre Swift is on his volume, what he's doing based on his volume, he's exceeded everyone around him in the database based on his touches per game, his rush times per game. DeAndre Swift is a special player. And hopefully he comes back this week because my teams need it. I don't want to start tearing up on stream here, but yeah, DeAndre Swift, please come back and be healthy. And I want the best for you. But that's all I'm going to say. But the other rookie running backs, you got to look at James Robinson pops out 60 evaded tackles, 5 evaded tackles per game as a rookie. Guys, we cannot overlook what he's doing against a lot of odds. This team is not a good team. Their quarterbacks are not very good. But everyone knows James Robinson's getting 15, 18, 20 touches, opportunities per game, and defenses are not stopping him. And he's evading tackles. He's creating big runs. He's catching the ball. And we haven't mentioned enough about the importance of receptions for running backs and what that does. It's very valuable. And I think last week, week 13 or week 12, whatever last week was, James Robinson, 6 targets last week? Very invaluable. Who knows where he should be? It's very difficult to rank him amongst the rookie RBs, but James Robinson has been the real deal. It's been impressive. And then Antonio Gibson has been making big run after big run. Honestly, what I should just tell you is this class is freaking good. No matter how you look at it, DeAndre Swift, big play after big play in limited opportunity. James Robinson, evading tackles, big runs on top of it, leading the league in opportunity share. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, making evaded tackles. He is making big runs. He's not catching the ball like you would like him to, but he is still gaining rush yards. He is still doing what he's expected to. He's just not doing he's not the RB5 overall like we thought he'd be. Antonio Gibson, he's seeing some receptions. He's doing things. I could go on and on. J.K. Dobbins exploded the last couple of games. Man, these running backs are the real deal. And then the hot button topic, I think what John was trying to get at when he asked this question before I went off my tangent, Jonathan Taylor, is he the real thing? He had a dip for about 3 or 4 weeks there where his opportunity share it wasn't looking good. We thought he was about to explode after the bye week. Wasn't looking good. But Jonathan Taylor has, I'm going to look here real quick. Jonathan Taylor has 31 targets through the 2.8 targets per game. If you were telling us before the season, and this is a line I always like to do, if Jonathan Taylor would be having on pace for a 40 target season, people wouldn't have believed you from the get-go. That's with Nyheim Hines blowing the doors off that beyond our expectations. With Jordan Wilkins getting more opportunity than we thought was possible. So Jonathan Taylor is still the real deal. He did well last week. I just think that we have to realize is that how special this running back class is. This is just a special class all around. It's not just the receivers. It's not just the running backs. It's the quarterbacks too. This is going to be, when we look back 6 years from now, how special the 2020 class was, because these are players you're going to want. And then 2021 is going to be special too. So we are at the golden age right now for rookies, and we're seeing it right now. I could keep going, but I'm just going to start spewing random numbers like a broken slot machine.
No, that's great. And, I didn't want to go too crazy with it. I just kind of wanted to, because I know a lot of people have question marks about Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, CEH especially. That's the big hot button issue is, like people are like freaking out and selling CEH everywhere. And it's like, like you said, you paid 105 for him. You drafted him so early and you're already giving up on the guy. And the thing is, the guy's done well. The guy's actually been good. And Timmy could, tell us, like how he's looked on film, but like he's looked good, especially in the numbers. He's looking good, but you look at the fantasy points, and it's not bad. It's not like doom and gloom,
A lot of that comes from probably what your perception was of what you were going to be getting coming in, that you were getting a top 5 running back. When that's not really something you should. If you're building a team and planning on that to start, that's probably not the way to do it. But like
you cut me to my core there, Tim. Cut me to my core with that comment.
But Davis said this many times about CEH over the season, is that he's performing, if you look at the actual numbers, he's performing just as well as you'd expect him to. It's just that you're not looking at it from a fantasy perspective. You're actually looking at it from how he's actually playing and how he's actually producing. And he's performing at a level that you would be very satisfied with if you didn't have expectations of him being a top 5 performer right out of the gate due to this offense.
Tim, that's really good part about CH is what the actually only problem with CH is his touchdowns. That's it. That's all. It's because it's because he has 5 touchdowns on the season total. And that's because Tyreek Hill's scoring over a touchdown per game. It's because Travis Kelce is dominating that offense. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire is gaining yards, he's getting opportunity, and he just hasn't performed the touchdown thing, which is not, I wouldn't say random, it just is highly variable. And going back to Jonathan Taylor one more time is, if you were telling me before the season that Jonathan Taylor would be the RB 16 in fantasy football, and I think Jonathan Taylor missed a week because of COVID, right?
Yep.
He missed a week because of COVID, and he has less than a 50% opportunity share, and he's still the RB 16, I'd be saying, okay, I'll accept it. But what people are actually doing is they are acting as if it's the ship is sinking and things like that. And now the last couple of weeks, things have changed for Jonathan Taylor, and his schedule looks nice. But guys, Jonathan Taylor, he's got it all. I'm sorry. I think there's still a little bit window to get Jonathan Taylor in fantasy, and it's time. I'll give people a Godfather offer, because I don't think I think he'll be an 80% opportunity share person or running back? No, just based how Indianapolis functions, but how good of a player he's valued too low. He's valued too low.
No, I agree. And honestly, it feels like most of them are attainable, because even James Robinson, as well as he's done, people are still freaking out about the fact that he's an undrafted free agent and everything. And so you can still go get most of these guys. I think the only one that was really like untouchable was Antonio Gibson, but then with the turf toe, you might even be able to go get him, and so it's kind of like a cool opportunity where even though we see that these guys are good, and they kind of all do it in different ways. We see with Swift that it's more with the target share, and then we see with like Jonathan Taylor, it's not as much. And I know that was kind of that was kind of part of his game, like the past like week or so, he's actually been receiving the ball, so maybe that'll go up. But in 2020, it really hasn't been that way. But yeah, like you said, we can talk all night about these numbers. The whole point was just to introduce or reintroduce the database, get people into it, and just show them like how much information there is, and that there's so much to learn, and it's weekly, it's daily. And you probably can't look at every single person out there or every single player in there, and keep up with it if you have kids and a job and everything like me. But you every once in a while you look at it and you're like, oh, Sam Darnold, or you look at it and you're like, oh, Jonathan Taylor, whoever it is. I found Tim Patrick early on from the database because I was looking at his target share, I was looking at his routes run and his snap share. And I was just seeing that, once Cortland Sutton went out, Tim Patrick was on the field 96% of the time. He was being targeted, 20+% of the time. And I'm like, I'm going to go get me some Tim Patrick. And guess what? He's actually won me weeks because of it. I've actually won fantasy games because of that. And it was a back end of, the roster kind of ad free, maybe I had spent $6 on him or something like that. So there's a lot of great uses for the database. That's why we wanted to show people. But like we said, we reach out whenever you need to. If you have any questions about it, reach out to me, reach out to Dave, even Tim. If he's not too busy watching film, you can even reach out to him.
Look, we've been shitting on Tim a little bit here, but as far as but Tim's very good at applying the numbers. Tim's likes to be balanced. He's more balanced than I am because I don't look at the film, but Tim looks at both sides of the thing. So, haha. But like we can poop on Tim all we want here. But the thing is that Contender Connection, and this Contender Connection is close to my heart because I have relied so much on happy hour week to week during COVID. Come check us out on Friday nights. Hit up Tim, hit up John. Even I am very little to do with Contender Connection at all. But I will even say, okay, thanks for DMing me. I'll go get John. So I'll bring him in here and come join us in happy hour because it's a group of people, not just guys, group of people who like to talk fantasy football and also have fun that we care about. It's something that I've been doing since like the second week of March. We talk about fantasy football. We talk about not even our lives, but it's a group of friends for fantasy football. And some of us are there every week. Some of us there pop in every couple weeks, and it doesn't matter. It's a fun time to talk fantasy football and just whatever's off your head. And that's a good place to talk about the database. So and what Tim is doing, stepping up as a co-host on the Contender Connection for the Monocle, it's been pretty cool to see. And I just have to say Monocle Dynasty Podcast and also Contender Connection and Happy Hour have a special place in my heart because they are a critical part of my fantasy experience.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
They did not pay me to say that, guys. I am not paid by John or Tim. This is I like to be like fluffy on Twitter here, but I'll talk about boners and stuff on the stream. And this is real life here.
I just
These
wanted
guys
to
are
add
the
to
real
that
thing.
experience real quick.
Yeah. So what you want? I'm going to go off the rails here in a second. Yeah, sure, Tim. But anyway, if anyone's still listening, definitely check out Happy Hour.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
What?
Follow that up, Tim.
I got to add to Dave's
boner,
experience
Tim.
a little bit though. I wore the sweater for him. The Josh Allen sweater.
Oh
God, Tim, I didn't even
I
notice
wore the
it.
Josh
and
Allen sweater for him. The Buffalo.
That's special. That's special.
All right.
That is a fleece. That we might have to put that up for auction when Tim gets to 1,000 followers because that's special. That's a special fleece.
I like it. I know Dave's got to get out of here. He actually has his own podcast.
It was next to me, and I'm like, you know what? Every time
All right, yeah, we're still lagging over here, but yeah, we got to get Dave out of here. He's doing his own pod. Real quick, tell us what your pod is because we didn't talk about it, and what you're up to.
Tale of Two Rivals is my podcast. It is a podcast designed basically Todd Foster at FF_Bannerman and myself, and actually Sean Kennedy. We are three rivals in fantasy football. We're friends, and it's where we try to take our different points of view and we come together for some banter and talk about dynasty strategy and also a little bit of redraft. And that's Tale of Two Rivals. Make sure to check out my database, which is this database that we've talked about all night, but also I have a rookie database going back to 2003 that is going to be updated come January. There's going to be a lot of fun with that, and we're going to really dive into that come January, looking at rookies. So and then also check out my writings at DLF Football or Dynasty League Football.
Yep. Yeah, Dave's big time now. He's over at DLF. That's awesome. But yeah, definitely go check out his pod, check out his articles. A lot of the database stuff goes into the articles, the opportunity to share and everything. Check all that out. We're going to let him go so he can go banter a little bit. And but yeah, I really appreciate you, Dave. And hopefully we can see some of you listeners on Friday at happy hour. Just send us a DM. I guess say bye, everybody. And then a delayed bye from Temmie, I'm sure.